Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm here with Michael. He is a senior at North Salinas High School, and today we are interviewing him surrounding the topic of historical contributions in honor of Black History Month. We're going to be asking him a few questions, and yeah, we hope you enjoy. So, starting off with the first question.
So, Michael, let's start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and why do you think Mr. Burns chose you to be interviewed today?
Well, my name is Michael Ndubisi. I'm a grassroots organizer here in the Salinas Valley. I'm originally from Long Beach, California, down south. My family moved up here about a year and a half ago, and it's really been, Salinas has been a second home for me. Building communities, strengthening relationships, and making a positive difference in people's lives. As to why I think Mr. Burns might have picked me, I'm not entirely sure. I think maybe it has to do with the work that I've been able and been so lucky to engage in over the period of the last year and a half. Our organization has become sort of known in this community for empowering young people to become leaders and creating a more just and equitable world. And I'm really proud of the work our organization's done, the things that we've been able to do. And I think that hopefully by sharing the stuff that we've been able to do, we're able to get other folks to do the same.
Okay, nice. So, what do you consider like a main source of motivation for you that drives you to continue advocating for things you believe in?
Yeah, I think it's the idea that I can make some sort of difference in people's lives is something that really drives me. I'm applying to colleges, as I'm sure both of you are in the process of doing. And for one of the colleges I'm applying to, they asked a really interesting question. They asked, what brings you genuine joy? And I remember thinking about it, and I wanted to say a bunch of funny things or like, going to hang out with friends or taking long walks or, chocolate, which I have a terrible sweet tooth. Don't tell my mom, but I do. And I ultimately came to the answer of it's that moment right before I go to sleep where I lay my head down on my pillow and I think about the things that I was able to do throughout the day. And I remember the fact, and I realized that as I'm in bed and as I'm falling asleep, someone else is able to sleep more soundly, more securely, whose life is now just a little bit freer because of the work that I've been able to do, or the work that some folks that I'm working with have been able to do. And as I fall asleep, I'm super excited about what the next day might bring, the work that we can continue, and who else we can help make, whose life we can make a little bit better in the next day. And so that brings me genuine joy. It motivates me to keep doing the work that I do. Abraham Lincoln once said that he wanted to leave this earth just a little bit better for having lived in it. And I want to do the same thing. I'm not saying that I'm going to be Abraham Lincoln, and leaving the world a better place can mean a whole wide range of different things. It can mean freeing the slaves, or it can mean just checking up on someone and asking how their day was and making someone else just feel a little bit more valuable, more worth, themselves, have a little bit more self-worth. And that's the work that we do as an organization. It ranges from those little things like checking in on folks in the middle of a pandemic, making sure that they're mentally healthy, to trying to reform police systems and entire cultures in our community. So that motivates me.
So next so in school, we learn about many prominent African American figures that have made positive contributions, such as Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Jackie Robinson, etc. But is there something or someone that you believe doesn't get enough recognition in today's school curriculum?
Oh boy, we could talk at great length about the folks throughout our history who have not gotten the recognition that they should. We could talk about the whitewashing of African American history and all kinds of different cultures' history. But I think not enough recognition gets given to the youth of our history. And as a youth organizer myself, I should hope that one day the work that my entire generation has gotten to engage in doesn't just get erased as something that happened. You look at all of the major movements throughout our history, they've been led by young people. we're talking about the civil rights movement. No one really talks about just how young Dr. King was. And this is a guy who skipped several grades and was a really young guy, and he was cut short in an incredibly young age. And we could talk about our nation's history and how young a lot of our founding fathers were. Now, granted, a lot of those guys were young because, the average lifespan was a lot shorter. So they had to do things at a younger age. But it's always the youth that's at the cutting edge of innovation, at the cutting edge of progress for our nation. And I think that when we talk about our history, we need to talk about the contributions that youth make. And that, I think, feeds into today, where our young people can feel like they can make a difference. Far too many young people feel like, oh, I'm young, I can't make an impact, and so whatever. And so they go out and they don't live life to the absolute fullest extent, filling their life with purpose and meaning, because they feel that throughout their history, the folks who've only made change have been old white folks, old white men. When in fact, a lot of those folks were young. A lot of those folks were people of color. And while they don't get their names in history books sometimes, they should know that can be them too. And so to answer your question very simply, I think the young people throughout our history who have made change, who have made progress, whose shoulders we stand on today, those are the folks that don't get the recognition that they deserve. And I hope that in the future, when our children's history books are being written, history doesn't erase the contributions our young people made, our generation made, because they've been big, they've been important.
Definitely. I feel like Gen Z as a whole generation, a lot of people underestimate us, but we are capable of so much, as we've seen like through the months of June when the Black Lives Matter movement was uprising. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. So referring back to that question, what ways do you think that the media and society in general can do a better job at shedding light on African Americans who positively contributed and continue to contribute to our nation?
Portrayal is something that's super important. When you turn on the evening news, or not the evening news, when you turn on the local news, and we're talking about some of the headlines, shooting at this place or robbery at this place, more oftentimes than not, you're going to see, someone of color. And that feeds into preconceived notions that folks have about people of color. That confirms that for a lot of folks. But then you have other people of color who are going out and they're making a difference in their community. They're improving their community. They're giving back to folks around them, but that doesn't get the same recognition. And so if there's more of an effort on the part of those who are controlling the media to shed light on those accomplishments and not just focus on the negative things that are going on in our communities, because I mean, there's no group of people, there's no one group of people that is perfect. There's no group of people that doesn't have, the issues that they have within their group. But we also have some of our best and brightest, and they need to have the same level of recognition. And so I think if there's a societal effort to say, look at these young people of color who are making a difference, let's shed a light on them, I think that we can begin to break barriers, shed light and get rid of ignorance entirely when it comes to racism and other forms of prejudice. So, I mean, looking at things like media and TV and music, the ways that African Americans are being portrayed oftentimes are not fair. And I know that because I've been on the receiving end of someone being radically confused at the idea that a Black person would come out and speak English the way that I am right now. At one of my old high schools, at my old high school in Wilson, I met some folks and I introduced myself. I was I was running for class president, and I wanted to get their vote. And one person was just like, how are you so clean and well-spoken? And just started listening to all of these incredibly insulting half compliments. And I was just like, what does this person think a Black person is? Why do they think Black people are dirty, are ghetto, as they like to say, and a whole host of other things? And so if in movies, we aren't showing Black people as gangsters, as shooting up their neighborhoods, and we're showing Black folks in school, we're showing Black folks running for office, we're showing Black folks making a difference, then that is one way that we can begin to make that difference. If we can see more Black folks running for office. And I can tell you from personal experience, again, when Barack Obama won in 2008, that was a pivotal moment for my life. I remember looking at him, and I was only 5 years old, and looking at this guy and seeing all these people cheering and all this stuff. My mom was crying. I remember thinking, who is this guy and why does everyone care about him? I didn't understand the concept of a president of the United States, but I looked at him, knew he was important, and thought to myself, I can be that. And so showing Black folks succeeding and not failing so frequently, because they do it it's a disproportionate effect that they're having, in this sort of portrayal, I think can really go a long way in again, breaking down these barriers and shedding light on ignorance and beginning to get rid of it. I know that was a really long-winded answer. I tend to do that, but I hope
perfect.
Communicate. All right.
So again, still talking about the subject of prominent figures throughout history, do you feel like these certain figures have been tokenized by society to further a message of toxic positivity?
Toxic positivity is a very interesting concept to me. I'll admit. I'm a pretty positive guy. I'm a pretty optimistic guy. And so I often find myself saying things that may come across as toxically positive. But I definitely recognize that the way some of our history has been presented to us would make us believe things that aren't necessarily true. The civil rights movement would not be nearly as successful as it was if it weren't for folks like Malcolm X, who in our schools we tend to learn was some radical guy who hated white people and, shifted people away from the more radical side of the civil rights movement and pushed people towards Martin Luther King. But it's sort of like the yin and the yang. They needed each other and they complement each other in order to move forward together. They had disagreements, to be sure, but they also relied upon each other. They both believed in the cause of justice. They had different ideas. They had disagreements at times, which we do to this day. But they both believed in progress. They both believed in racial equity and racial justice. And when we teach our history to believe that some of our Black leaders were inherently bad people, that's not very productive because we're not receiving that holistic view of what the civil rights movement was, of what our history has been. Yeah, no problem.
So for the next question, what are your thoughts on the educational system teaching history from a Eurocentric perspective? Do you think there has been an erasure of Black history, and how could that affect the African American community?
Well, I think that public education needs to get better. I struggle to think of anyone who would disagree with that sentiment. Obviously, a lot of our history has been Eurocentric. And I've had some really great history teachers who have made an effort to make us understand that, the center of all human history has not been Europe, that the globe is the globe and that different things happen at different times. A lot of major world events happened in places that weren't, Europe. Some things happened in Africa, some things happened in Asia, and they happened at the same time. You take, for example, like the birthplace of agriculture. It took place in like the Middle East and also happened in South America, right? And there isn't really an effort to really sort of embed that into people's minds. And so people think, oh, well, agriculture, peasant farmers in feudal Europe, that's where it all started. And that's not necessarily true. And I was lucky to be able to take courses that were really honest in that sense. Because if you don't understand history to the fullest extent in an AP class, then you're going to go in and fail the test. So there's that. And as far as erasure goes, I think that, yeah, there has been erasure. The fact that we need a Black History Month means that, yeah, our history is not being told to the fullest extent. We aren't being honest about a great portion of our nation's population. And that warrants us to have a Black History Month, a Latino History Month, and a Asian American History Month, and a Pacific Islander History Month. We shouldn't need February to be Black History Month. We should have Black history be American history because that's what it is. So, yeah, there has been erasure. Our public education system isn't perfect. lots can be done to reform that, and I could talk at great length about those things. But yeah, I think that we need to move to a place in our society where we don't need February to be Black History Month.
Okay, last
Can't have.
so within the district, we are doing weekly lessons throughout the month of October. So for example, right now we're talking about historical contributions. I know for another week, we're talking about hate speech and social justice and African American first. But what do you hope that people can take away from these upcoming weekly lessons surrounding Black history?
That we're human. There's so much hate, and I know that you're going to be talking about a lot of these different issues this week. You're talking about historical contributions, but for centuries, Black people have been dehumanized, marginalized, and oppressed. And there's this idea that we aren't people, that we have not been contributing as much to world history. Going back to your last question, our history has been erased. Our contributions to this country have been erased. A lot of things that we in this country enjoy so much and utilize on a daily basis were invented by Black folks. I could go into like a list of inventions, which when I was like in 5th grade, I found out about these things. I was just like, whoa, Black people did that? Why isn't that something I knew? It's something I'd be proud of. And so I commend the district on their efforts to do this. And I hope that by the end of it, we're more united. We have to remember that unity is not a goal, it's a means towards justice. And so by learning about our history and understanding what is really taking place in our past, we can come together, realize that we aren't that different. There's more things that bring us together than pull us apart, and move forward in creating a more just world. There are lots of issues facing this world, and we can only really face them together. We can't be divided in those fights.
So, what piece of advice would you give to young people today, and what are different ways that we can do to help make positive contributions in our society?
Well, I would say first, join my organization. No, I'm kidding. What I would say is keep it on. There's going to be lots in this world that's going to tell you that your efforts are in vain. There's going to be lots in this world that tell you that you can't make a difference or that you're not doing enough. I can tell you that I've experienced those things. Some of those things are actually internal. And to be clear, you can never really do enough if there is still people who are hungry in this world. There are still people who don't have homes in this country, in the richest country in the world, by the way, and in this world in general. If there is still injustice, your work as an organizer and a justice seeker and a change maker can never be done. But don't ever let someone tell you that your contributions have not been enough. If you're doing everything you can and more, keep doing that. Keep bringing others, keep recruiting others to do the same, and change will happen. That's been, if anything, if history has taught us anything, it's that those who continue, those who keep on, they're the ones who get to make the changes that we so value today. Yeah, just maintain perseverance. That's incredibly important in this sort of work. And if you want to create change, you've got to keep on.
Definitely agree. Definitely agree. Everything you said was so well spoken, and like couldn't have said it any better. But that was all the questions that we had. I really enjoyed talking to you and hearing what you say. I hope that everyone watching at least gained a piece of knowledge, because I definitely did. And yeah, thank you for joining us, Michael. It was really nice talking to you, and I hope we can have another conversation like this soon.
Me too. Did you all get everything you needed?
Yes, perfect. It was all perfect.
Okay.